Okay, Zogt the Heilige Gemara. So today is Chof Tes Adar. It's the last day of Adar, and today is also the Yortet of Rebecca Kametsky Zechet Tzaddik L'Rocha. I remember when he was in Toronto. He was in Toronto many times. I remember meeting him. He once spoke for our class by Shmuel Bar Mitzvah. He spoke for our class, and what brought him to America, I believe he was in a koil called the Sluska koil, and as part of being in that koil, every young man had to raise money for the koil. So they once a year, a young man was sent to America, and one year it was Rabbi Yaakov's turn to go. So he went and he was soliciting pledges from people in America to send money to the Slutzka koil. And what happened is the koil office had an interesting practice. Let's say he would solicit a $50 pledge from somebody. So he would report it back to the office, and then the office would send the fellow a $100 receipt in hopes that maybe he would up his donation to $100. That's how I understood it. And Rabbi Yaakov, whose integrity was impeccable, said, I can't be involved in something like this. But he still had a responsibility to his koil to help them raise money. So what he did was he took the job as a Rav. I believe it was in Seattle. Took a job as a Rav, and he sent back whatever he learned. He sent back to the koil, whatever he earned, because he owed them money. But he didn't want to raise money in such a way where he felt it was lacking in his high level of integrity. So that's what caused Rabbi Yaakov to remain in America, and then eventually he made his way up to Canada. Actually, he became a Rav here. Shmuel told me that when he wanted to open up the yeshiva in Philadelphia, he went to his Rosh Yeshiva Rav Aaron, and Rav Aaron said, don't open a yeshiva in Philadelphia, you will not succeed. And my father told me, don't listen to your Rosh Yeshiva, go, you'll succeed. And sure enough, okay, so yesterday we learned about two Nazir, and the Farish was kind enough to make it that they both became Nazirim at the same time, so at least all of their expiry dates line up. And someone said, one of you two guys are Tomei, Thomas Mace, which is Soiser your Nazirs, yet I don't know which one. So now there's a suffix who is Tomei and who is not. So in order to satisfy all the needs and all the chiyuvim, what they do is, after 30 days, which either would be the end of Naziris or a period of Tumah, they both get the taglachas, which they would need regardless of whether or not they were tamei or whether they were tahor. Now, if they were tamei, they could have had the taglachas weeks ago, as soon as they became tamei. But here, neither one could, because they might be tahor, where they wouldn't be allowed to have a taglachas until the end of the 30-day period. So they would both have a taglachas, and they would bring one set of karbanos as if it was a nazir completing his naziris b'tahira, and another set of karbanos that a nazir who becomes tamei would bring. And they make it nigh. If I'm the person who's supposed to get the tamei karbanos, then I get the tamei karbanos. And if I'm the person who's supposed to get the Torah karbanos, I get the Torah karbanos. 30 days later, they also, for the next 30 days, they both have to keep naziris because one of them is tamei and one of them is now counting his naziris to tahira, yet they don't know which one. So they both keep another 30 days of naziris, and after that second period of 30 days of naziris, they go through the same process of taglachas again. This time they only bring one set of karbanos to tahira, and they say whoever is the one that was tamei earlier and now had to recount his naziris to tahira, that is the person for whom these karbanos should go. And that took us to the end of the Mishnah on Nun Zayin Amud Aleph, which is yesterday's daf. Zok the Heilige Gemara. Katani Shnei Nazirin Sha'amar Lahem. We learned our Mishnah. Two Nazir Sha'amar Lahem Echad. Somebody told one person told one of these two, or Easy Echad Mikem Shenitma Ve'eni Yodea Eza Mikem. For the Gemara, why does either one have to keep Tahira? So why does either one have to assume that he became Tamei? Let them both go with their cheskes kashrus, their cheskes tahira, and let them both ignore this person saying testimony. Why? Because we have special rules when it comes to Sofek Tumah. And we learn from Soita that Sofek Tumah, B'shusa Yochid, Svekei Tamei, if there's a suffix of whether or not someone became tamei or something became tamei, and the suffix occurred in the Rishus HaYachid, that person would be vadai tamei. We treat him like a vadai tamei. And if it's Rishus HaRabim, we treat it like a vadai tar. So, for the Gemara, what is this case over here? Is it a Rishus HaRabim or is it a Rishus HaYachid? So let's analyze. Don't think you use the parameters of Shabbos, where Rishus HaRabim D'Oraisa has to have 600,000 people traveling. That's not how it works when we classify what is a Rishus HaRabim and what is a Rishus HaYachid, like Abba the Shaila of Tumah. V'amai, kol Sofek Tumah Rishus HaYachid, mehechei afinula. What is the makar of Sofek Tumah Rishus HaYachid? Misoita. By Soita, you know how many people are involved? Two, the man and the woman. And nobody else knows what occurred behind those closed doors. Ma Soita, boil v'neveles, afkol Sofek Tumah Rishus HaYachid. How do you classify a Rishus HaYachid for the purposes of Sofek Tumah? Based on the parameters of Soita. There's two people there. Kogoy Dika Betray. Aval Hacha, there's the two Nazirim and there's the spectator. Aval Hacha, Shnei Nazirim, V'hai, the Koy Gabeyon. Hatlo Sahaba. Now you have three people. Three is a crowd. So the kash is they should both approach this as if they're tar, and they should each just bring their karbanos of tahira at the end of the first 30 days, and that's it. That is the Gemara's kash. Yep, because we're showing that the way you classify Rishus HaRabim for the purposes of Sofek Tomei is three people. Three people is Rishus HaRabim. Rabbi Bar Huna, who said that the third person was there. Maybe he was watching what happened remotely and he wasn't there at all. I wasn't there. I was far away. And I saw a dead body that was thrown in between you. It hit one of you. I couldn't tell which one. I never knew which one. I know one. But I wasn't there. So in fact, I witnessed from a distance what occurred in Rosh Hashanah. I guess that much he knew. That much he must have known. Correct. It's classified differently. Exactly correct. Amar Bashi Dekanami, I'll prove it to you that the guy wasn't right there with them and he was at a distance. Because it says the Katani, the Eini Yodeya Ezemikem. It doesn't say, I forgot. I know when you got told me and now I forgot. It says the Eini, I never knew because I was standing too far, I couldn't tell. And therefore, it's a Raya Shmami no that was the case. So there's a huge sugi over here of how Sofek Tomei, Rishus HaYachid, Sveikei Tomei, and Sveikei Tahor works. And just, I want to just scratch the surface of this unbelievable sugya, this Welt sugya, but we'll start with Taisus, who has a Moiridik Akash. The second intermediate line, who I made Meirachak. This witness is standing at a distance. Therefore, the Sofek Tumah Rishus HaYachid. Frek Taisus a bomb kasha. Vim Toimer im Kain. If you say Sofek Tumah Rishus HaYachid Sveikei Tomei, well, each of these two people have a suffix. So each of these two people should be classified as Vadai Tomei. The halacha is Sofek Tumah Rishus HaYachid Sveikei Tomei means you'll even burn Truma, which is an Isur D'Oraisa. You'll even burn Truma over it. So Sofek Tumah Rishus HaYachid Sveikei Tomei means you paskin that it's Vadai Tomei. Well, then each of these people have a Sofek Tumah on them, so then each of them should bring a Vadai carbon Tumah. So it's a psak of a Vadai Tumah. So if that's the case, each of these two people should fear Zich, not as a Sofek, but rather as a Vadai Tumah, and you don't need this whole Tanai business. But Yeshloimar, a more clarification in how Sofek Tumah works. The Loigemiri Misaita, that it's a Vadai psak of Tumah, Eladover She'efshir Liyos, Kisaita de Efshir Shnitmas. It's only a psak of a Vadai if it's actually possible in reality that occurred. By a Saita, it is possible that when they were in seclusion, they were matama. That is definitely a real possibility. If it's a real possibility, then yes, the Sofek Tumah paskins it. Here we know it only made one of these two people tummy. That's a fact that we're aware of. So you cannot use Sofek Tumah to paskin bevadai against what we know that the facts are. The vadai echatahar. So Now we've learned a new rule. When do you say Safek Tameh B'Shus Yochid is a Vadei Tumah? That's only if it's possible that that's the truth from a realistic perspective. But if it's impossible, then you just have to be Macham or be Safek and say that they're both Tameh, and you don't follow their Cheskas Kashrus. So in fact, if you analyze it, there's two halachas in Safek Tameh B'Shus Yochid Tzvei Tameh. A is don't follow the Cheskas Tahira, and B, Paskin B'Vadi that's Tameh. They don't always both apply. In any case, you'll always say, don't follow the Cheskas Tahira. But only if it's possible, in reality, that the psak will be real, only then do you actually say it's a psak Avadai Tum. So then look at it on the flip side. Imkain, my parach may kara. What was the original kasha? The Gemara wanted to suggest that everyone should just bring karbanos to Tahira. My parach may kara. And what was the Gemara's intention? The Gemara wanted to say that each one should just bring our karbanos to Tahira, and neither one should worry about the fact that they became tamei. Well, that's also an impossibility, because we also know that one of these two people for sure became tamei. The both sides of the coin are learned from Saita. That Savak Tamei B'Shus Yochid Tzvei Tamei is from Saita, and we learned that's only if it could have possibly occurred. And even the Savak Tamei B'Shus Rabim Tzvei Torah that we learned from Saita is also only if it could have possibly occurred. And in this case, that couldn't have occurred either. Here you also have a problem that one is Tamei for sure. So how could the Gemara and the Havni suggest that they're both tar, they both bring karbanos to Tahira? So now Tosfos unloads another bombshell upon us. Yeshleimer the Savak Tamei B'Shus Rabim lav mi Saita gamin law. We don't learn Savak Tamei B'Shus Rabim from Saita. We learn from Saita Savak Tamei B'Shus Yochid. Savak Tamei B'Shus Rabim remains on the default. The default is you go basa your chazaka. Chad v'chad mukminin achas kasei. So as the kasha, there's places where you see it's a psak. But what Tosfos is saying here is that the Gemara's kasha originally was, this is a regular case of Savak Tumah. Each of these individual Nazirim had a cheskas Tahira. Don't come together to the Bezdin. Go separately to Bezdin. Bezdin will pass on each one of these people their tahar, and that's it. They don't need to bring us. They don't need to bring any karbanos of Tumah. That was the Gemara's kasha. The Gemara answered that in fact it is Rosh Hashanah, because if it was Rosh Hashanah, it would be no. The Gemara answered the fact it was Rosh Hashanah because the third party was not there; he was far away. It's Tavik Tamei B'Shus Yochid, and Tavik Tamei B'Shus Yochid. Although we cannot say Vadei Tamei because that doesn't make sense, it couldn't possibly have occurred. But we at least say that removes their Cheskes Tahira, that component of this Gzeres HaKosev of Tavik Tamei B'Shus Yochid Tzvei Tamei does exist. There's no Cheskes Tahira, and therefore they're both in a matziv of Safek. So the Minchas Chinuch, they have to bring a carbon tumah. One of them has to bring a carbon tumah. The Minchas Chinuch has huge clears about this sugya, and that is as follows: there's a Gzeres HaKosev in Hilchas Tumah v'Tahira. Is this object tamei or is it not tamei? Is this person tamei or is he not tamei? You have the rule of Savak Tamei B'Shus Yochid Tzvei Tamei, Savak Tamei B'Shus Rabim Tzvei Torah, right? But what about Lagabe Isser v'Heter? So there's actually a Zashayla. This woman, it's a suffix if she was noyef or not. She has a cheskes kashrus. But we say Tzvei Tamei. Should he be able to marry a kohen? Can a kohen marry her, or is she considered a zoyna? In other words, is the psak halacha of Tzvei Tamei just a din in Tumah, but it doesn't apply to other halachas of Isser v'Heter? So maybe a kohen can marry this woman because she has cheskes kashrus. I'm sorry? If she becomes an amun, of course, yeah. So this shaila comes up in many different places, and the Minchas Chinuch is the one who clears this shaila. The Minchas Chinuch writes, he has like a 10-page arichos on this sugya, and he writes, since I'm very, very busy and I can't be ma'ayim properly in this sugya, and I have a simple, feeble mind. Who am I even to touch on these things? I'm going to clear a shaila. Could be it's complete amaratis, but I'm going to clear what my mind is coming to me. And it turns out, he says, I saw in the Kudish Vegas and the Ksais HaChoishin that he also clears the shaila. So I was very excited. I was mechavan el emes. So he has a ganze binyan, a ganze arichas. I couldn't think it through clearly, so I probably tamaratzis, but I'm going to write it anyway. That was the level of a nivis of the minchas chinuch. But there's a shaila from a Psi Pesach Frank where they have a shaila as follows. There was a college, and somebody wanted to know if I can go to college. And the shaila was, there was a medical school in the college, and they had Mason there, and it's one building with the law school. And he wants to go, this Kohen wanted to go to law school. Rabbi Moshe has a shaila, if a Kohen is allowed to go to medical school. Rabbi Moshe has a whole shaila, if a Kohen is allowed to go to medical, and he shrais chai v'kayim, absolutely not. There's even a shaila, if Moshe screams absolutely not, that's a whole different shaila. But if Steve Frank was clearing if a fellow could even go to law school, if it's in the same building, if we know that the lab where they have the bodies the door will always be closed. So he has a whole shaila, and it's all based on there's a
subject. There's only an issue in Eretz Yisrael because goyim aren't metame boil.
Well, first of all, that's not so poshut. There are Rishonim. We actually learned in the Toshes earlier that there are Rishonim who learn that goyim are metame boil. So there's that shaila, what you brought up a figure, is part of the discussion. And then there's the shaila, if you hold that they're not metame boil, so you can go to Saroiv, and you can say it's probably a goy. And he paskins that a college is surely considered a Rishus HaRabim. There's for sure at least 3 people in the college, hopefully, right? So therefore, he had a tzat to say that maybe Svei Kaitar, Shavim Shem Svei Kaitar, and therefore it should be, the coin should be allowed. But then he gets into this whole shaila of the Minchas Chinuch, but that's only if you hold Svei Kaitar as a psak halacha, even like a Beit Shebeheter. But as we just mentioned, that could be it's only a shaila of Shavim Tum Rishus Yochid if the coin is tummy or not. But whether or not he's allowed to be there and violate his chiyuv for kahuna, that's a whole different shaila, and therefore it could be a problem. So this shaila, which seems like an academic shaila, is actually very negeya halacha lamaisa. If you would allow a kohen to be in certain places, can you use safek tumah b'shus yachid as one of the sniffim to be matter, or is it 2 different things? So if it's relevant to Hilchos Isser V'Heter, well, that will be a huge smach to be matter the kohen to be there. But if you hold that you can't treat it as Svei Tahar, then the kohen will have a problem. So I'm not going to give you all the details, because I'm not clearing them, but I always like to bring out how from what we think is some Lomda Shesugya impacts our day-to-day life. Yeah. Okay, so let's see the Gemara weiter. Let's see the Hil Gemara weiter. Zog the Hil Gemara. Megalchin u'meviin. So on our Mishnah, we discussed how they deal with the karbanos. Now we're going to discuss how do they deal with their haircuts. Vabai Freik the Gemara. How could they take these haircuts? Dilma lav tameidinun. So let's think. The first set of haircuts they had to take. They're either a Nazir finishing off his Seder of Naziris. The Torah says you're allowed to shave your head. Or he's a Nazir that became Tameh, so he's reshedding his Naziris. But the second set, one of these 2 people has no chiyuv, he's completely finished. And he's taking a haircut that violates L'shakivu, Pas Roishkem, and he doesn't have any reason to. So Vamai, Dilma, Lav, Tameim, Inun. Maybe they're not Tameh. And the second haircut, Vika Avad HaKafa. And now they're doing Hakafa Shaloi Kedin. Amar Shmuel, and Tosfos adds, and there's also a shchasa, because it's done with a tar, so therefore it will be a shchasa as well. Amar Shmuel, this Mishnah is not speaking about a male who's prohibited from Hakafa Sarosh. This Mishnah is speaking about an Isha V'Katan, because if it was a male, in fact, you're going to have a problem. They won't be able to do their second taglachas, because it might be a taglachas of Isser without the chiyuv aseh of a Nazir. So our Mishnah was discussing an Isha and a Katan. An Isha we know could become a Nazira. A Katan who's a mufla samach le'ish, someone who's almost an adult, so he can be makabel Naziris, he can make Nadarim, but he's still not mechuyev in L'Shakidu Pas Roishchem. That's who our Mishnah is talking about. For the Gemara, Shmuel could have offered a much better teretz. But look, let's say we're speaking about an adult. but it's not in violation of the Isra of Akafas of Elisha Kifu. You know why? Because maybe he holds the Akafas Kol Roish Loishma Akafa. There's actually a shaila whether or not completely shaving your entire head bald is that a violation of Elisha Kifu. Could be Elisha Kifu is only if there's a strip around, so you leave the hair on top growing, and you just cut around it. There are people who shave bald. I always think of this Gemara when I see them, because they probably hold like the Shita. If I would ask them, yo, how for the Shita as a Hakafas Kol HaRosh Lishma Hakafah? You think these guys are modern Orthodox? No, they're Yeshivish. Other Rabbi, ich halte von der andere Shita. I'm a Horus, what du bist. Der Mond mich, schneid mein Peis. Ich sage, ich am Horus. Ich halte Hakafas Kol HaRosh Lishma Hakafah. That's not trying it, right? They're mamish briskers, the people who shave their whole heads. I look at them, I'm afraid to shoes I'm wearing with them, because they're going to rip me to shreds. Kavalti. Hakafas Kol HaRosh Lishma Hakafah. So why didn't it offer such a teretz? Zok Gemara, midaloi mukim lahachi. Since Shmuel did not use this teretz, Shmamina, it clearly shows kasavar Shmuel hakavas kolarosh shema kafa. Clearly, Shmuel holds even shaving your whole head off is also iser. So he couldn't explain that's the reason why they're begalayach over here, even though there's a suffix iser, and therefore Shmuel had to say that it's speaking either about women or about children. There's a funny. I'm sorry. I don't know. There's a good point. There's a funny vikuach. The Rambam writes that the reason why Hakafa, the reason why the Torah says was a kivu pas roshchem is because the priests used to take their haircuts that way, and they don't want us to look like priests. And the Torah goes on a rant against the Rambam and says, "How dare you're going to be dashin time of the Krah, and and then you're going to be matter if the priests change their style." So that's a Torah being magia on the Rambam. So the Beis Yosef, who supports the Rambam, comes screaming at the Torah. I can't believe that the Torah would have a havamina to think that the Rambam would do such a thing and make exceptions to the rule because of that reason. Avada not, and you don't find any Rishonim that would have ever done anything like that. And the Rambam was the God, how could you be choshen for something like that? He was just throwing up a svara, but Avada, no matter what, it's going to be awesome. And then the Ramah, who supports the Torah, writes, I can't believe that the Beis Yosef thought that the Torah thought that the Rambam was doing something of violation. So the whole stickle about that going back and forth. It's like a whole therapy session. I can't believe that you thought that I thought that you thought that it was going to be usher. Zok Gemara, Mar Zutra Masni Lo Shmacha de Shmuel Aseh. Mar Zutra says that this whole conversation about Shmuel saying that it's referring to a woman or a cotton was on the Sefer. And now we're going to get slowly into complicated mess 102, the extension of what we learned a couple of days ago. Nazir sh'aya tamei b'safek umuchlet b'safek. You had a Nazir who it was a safek if he became tamei tumas meis, and it was a safek if he was a mitzayra. So the halacha is, we said oichel b'kodeshim la'achar shishim yom, and umigaleach dalit tagalachos. He ends up needing 4 haircuts, 2 for the tzaras, 1 for the nazirs of tumah, and 1 for the nazirs of taira. But if in fact he wasn't tumah, and if in fact he was not a mitzayra, then he was only allowed to do 1 hakafa. Yet we're allowing him to have 3 additional haircuts. And that was the kasha that Shmuel was dealing with. And to respond to that, Amar Shmuel be'isha v'katan. It's speaking about an isha and a katan, and therefore they were allowed to take these haircuts because they're not covered by the isha of Lashik. Amar Funa. Could you could explain it the same way, but Shmuel was actually addressing that Mishnah. Avada, you would have to use the same swear for this Mishnah.
A cotton could become another.
Yeah, a mufla samach leish at a certain age, even before he's bar mitzvah. Once we determine that he's aware enough and knows what he's talking about, he could make nedarim, including nazirs. So Amar Avuna, who is, when you're getting a haircut, I don't know too many people that give themselves haircuts. You're usually getting the haircut from somebody else. So you're not doing anything. So, but most people don't. So the halacha is if you get a haircut to cut off your payas, you're chayiv only if you help. If you don't help, then it's a lav shem b'mas, you didn't do anything. So if you look at the barber says move this way, move that way, push, the barber positions your head. You're supposed to hold the head in the position the barber holds it. So when you're doing that, that's called you being Misayaya. So Amar Rav Huna. Aha, I hear it. To be kind of mitzvah. Amar Rav Huna, hamakiv es a cotton. If somebody cuts the payas off a cotton, hareyu chayiv, the makiv is chayiv. So there's an isser not only for the nikaf, but for the makif as well. Amar Bada Baravel Rav Huna. So apparently, in those days, children had haircuts where all their payas were shaved off. In those days, they didn't go to Baba V'chayder. All the kids ran around without payas. They walked around. No, all kids without. You're going to see the end of the story. Everybody went without payas. So Ibazoi Rav Ada Barava asked him, "And your children lididach man migalayach lahim." If you hold that even makif is a cotton, I hold, Tosfos explains, I hold that if you're makif it's a cotton, you're potter. Because since the cotton is not mechuyev in mitzvahs, makif, you taking his hair off is not a problem. But you hold that makif it's a cotton is chayiv, which you just said, Rav Huna. So then how is it that your children have such haircuts? The person, the adult who did it is aser. Amar Lei, he told him, chayva, it's my wife chayva. Does anybody have a wife who's not chayva? So who did it chayva? Tosfos said it was the name of his wife. I thought it was the name of his credit card bill, but it could be they were interchangeable. So Amalei, I didn't do it. Chayva did it. So Reb Ada Barava said something that's very scary. He said, your wife is violating the Isser of Lois Akivu, Tikberinun Chayva Levanei. That aver should cause that she should bury her children. It was Dover Hayoyte Mipitzadik and Kishkoga Shiyotzas Milefnei Shalit is what Tosfos uses, and because of that, Kulu Schneider of Ada Barava during the entire lifetime of Ada Barava, Akim Lazar Rav Huna was never able to have a child that survived from his wife Chayva. So Zok Gemara, let's analyze halachically what's happening here. Mirti, Tavayu Svira Lahu, everybody holds Hakafas Kolarois Shema Hakafa. Everybody holds Hakafas Kolarois Shema Hakafa, because otherwise there would be no problem here at all. It wouldn't be a violation. So no matter what you hold like other halachas, for sure a complete haircut is a violation. So b'ma kamifli. So what is the machlokes between Rav Ada Barava and Rav Huna? And Tosfos says it's not only a single pronged machlokes, it's actually a double pronged machlokes. The Rav Huna sover lois akivu pas roichem lois hashchus es pas ziknecha, and we learn kol sheyesh loy. We need the gears to change over here because it helps us a lot. Kol sheyesh noy bashchosna yesh noy be hakafa. Any person who's mechuyev in not shaving their beard, which would mean a male who has a beard, they have the isser of lois akivu pas roichem. But the hani nashi women, since they're not included in the isser of shaving their beards, why? Because they don't have beards. Therefore, they're totally exempt from the isser of l'shakifu, and therefore they're even allowed to cut somebody else's payas off. We're about the ba'ava savar. No, echad hamakif ve'echad hanikaf b'mashma. It doesn't make a difference when it says l'shakifu. It's referring to both the person that's giving the haircut, and it's also referring to the person who's receiving the haircut. And Tosfos, the long Tosfos adds that there's really a dual machlokes, because really Rav Ada Barava also held that it was mutter to cut, because he held that you were allowed to cut the hair of a cotton, as we're about to read. The iskish makav l'nika, koleicha the nikaf mechayiv makav nami mechayiv. When is the makav chayiv? Only if the person who's getting the haircut is prohibited from shaving his head. But the high cotton, hoyel v'hu guvay la bar hu. Therefore, since the child itself, he's not a bar oinchin. The child who's getting the haircut is not a bar oinchin, the mechayiv that he can be chayiv. Therefore, makiv nami loy mechayiv. Therefore, the person giving the haircut is not mechayiv. So really, Rabbi Barava said, if you ask me, you Rav Huna yourself could have given your son a haircut with no consequences, because if your child is not mechayiv, you're not mechayiv. You came up with your chiddush that it's also to give the child a haircut, even though the child is not mechuyev. You're still mechuyev. Oh, then how could your wife give a haircut? The teretz is because Rav Huna argues in Rav Ada Bar Abba on a different halacha, and he said Hanin Noshi, since they're not included in the Isser of Ashkosa, they're also not included in the Isser of Akafa. Because it was Kishkaga Hayochim Diva Shalit. Because he was thinking, for you, it should be a problem. But Lemaisa, he himself held it would be mutter. So that's what I meant to say. Everybody held it was mutter. The whole Shiloh of Toshis is why it would be mutter. Okay. Zok the Gemara. I don't think we pass like this. So Lema Hakavas Kol Rosh Shanoi. So okay. That's not what Toshis said over here. Here. Okay. Zok the Gemara. Lema. Let's suggest that this question that we have, if a Hakavas Kol Rosh, completely shaving, is that a violation of Losakivu? Let's say Tanoyi to Machlokes tonight. The Tanur Rabbana. And this is all chazar of what we already learned earlier in the Masechta. Roshai. Remember, it says in the parasha of Mitzayir that he has to get a complete Gillette track too. And let's see the pasuk inside. Now, Eskol Sarai, we said, includes every single hair on his body. Yet the pasuk season need to itemize. Es Roshai, Vesakanoi, Vesgabish Einov, Veskol Sarai Galeach. So the Gemara wants to know, the Brisa wants to know, if the Brisa already, if the pasuk already said that a Mitzayir has to cut up all the hair of his head, why does the pasuk then have to itemize as Roshai, as Skanoi? Well, that's part of his Kol Basari. So we learn from there Roshai. Why does the Torah have to specify that a Mitzayir cuts the hair off his head? Ma Talmud Loimar. It says in the pasuk, Lo Shakivu Pas Roshchem. Every Yid is prohibited to cut off all the hair of his head. So therefore, Yochel Ach Mitzayir came. I would thought a Mitzayir may also not cut off all the hair of his head, and therefore, when the Mitzayir cuts his hair off, he has to leave the pious. Talmud Loimer Roshai. The Torah says no. Even though I already told you to cut off all your hair, I'm specifically telling you Roshai to say that you have to cut off your pious as well, which is basically Aseh Docha Lois Aseh. V'tanya Idach, and we have another brayso that says Roshai. Ma Talmud Loimer. Why does it say Roshai? By a Nazir it says Tar lo yavar al rosh. So Yochel af Nazir Mitzayir came. What if somebody is a Nazir who is prohibited from cutting his hair, and he becomes a Mitzayir, and in the process of tahira he has to cut his hair? Is he allowed to cut his hair? That's what the Torah tells you, Roshai, that even though you're a Nazir and you're prohibited because of a lav and because of an Aseh, it says Tar lo yavar al roshai, and it also says Kadosh Yeh Gadol Peres HaRoshai. So there's the lav and an Aseh prohibiting this Nazir from cutting his hair. Nevertheless, if he's a Mitzayir, the Torah is telling you through the process of tahira you must cut your hair. So my lav tanoi, if we have a machlokes how to dash in Roshai, is it talking about a regular Yid teaching us a Seder Chaloiseh, or we're speaking about a Nazir, which is teaching us that a Seder Chaloiseh Basei? Maybe that machlokes is precisely our shaila. Leman Amar mi Nazir. If you learn it from Nazir, in other words, you need the pasuk of Roshai to tell you that even a Nazir can cut his hair if he's a Mitzayir, because I don't need a pasuk to tell me that a regular Yid can shave off all his hair if he's a Mitzayir. You know why? Because since there is no Isser at all for a regular person to cut off all his hair, I don't need Roshai to tell me that you can violate Lo Shakifu. Because in fact, cutting your hair is not a violation of Lo Shakifu. But a Nazir, it is a violation of. That's why the Tana makes it more complex and says Roshai is there to tell you that even a Nazir, a Mitzayir, can cut his hair. The Chiyasakra, Lemitchias Loisese Ve'aseh of Naziris. But the Idich, the Mandamar who held that Roshai tells you a Chiddush that even a regular Yid can cut his hair. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to cut it. You know why? Because Savar Akavas Kalaroi Shma Kafa. He held even cutting off all the hair is an Israel Losakivu. So you need a pasuk to tell you that smaller Chiddush that I say the Chiyasakra Lemitchi Lav Grade. Beautiful. If you hold Lo Shakivu Pas Roshchem applies, even if you cut off your whole hair, then you need a pasuk by Mitzayir to tell you you're allowed to do that. And if you'd be allowed to do that anyway, because the Israel Shakivu does not prohibit cutting off all your hair, then the extra Roshai is telling you that when there is a prohibition, such as if you're a Nazir, you still do it when you're cleansing yourself from tsaras. Amar Rava, not necessarily. The Chula al Makavas Kalarosh Loish Makav. Everybody can hold Akavas Kalarosh Loish Makav. So we understand very well if you are Marba Nazir, But why in the world would I need a pasuk to tell you that a regular Jew can cut his hair if he's a Mitzayah? Why not? There's no issue in it. The Aseh kra is kegoy shehikif ulubasayv tekilach. You're right. If you did one big haircut, there is no issue of losakifu. But what if first you, in the process of shaving your head as a Mitzayah, you first just cut around where your payas are, and only later on do you cut the rest of the hair? There, you're doing it in such a way where there is a losakifu. And that's what the pasuk is telling you. You're allowed to do it that way. Since if you shaved your whole head off in one shot, I don't mean your head, I mean the hair of your head, in one shot, there wouldn't be a chiyuv because there is no iser to cut all your hair off. Even if you did it in such a way where first you cut the pace and only later on did you take off the rest of the hair, nami loy mechayev. Frank the Gemara, you cannot say that would be mutter. Avada, that would be usher, because we had the famous Rish Lakish. Umi because of krahachi, ya amar Rish Lakish. When do you say Aseh Docha loisaseh? Kol makom shata moitze Aseh v'loisaseh. Whenever you have an Aseh and a loisaseh, the Aseh of Mitzayah cutting his hair off, and the loisaseh of a Yid cutting off his payas. If you can fulfill the Aseh without violating the loisaseh, such as cutting off the hair of your whole head in one shot, muta, then there's no contradiction at all. If there's no possible way to be Mekayim the Aseh without being over the loisaseh, only then do you say Yahweh Aseh v'yitchas loisaseh. But you're suggesting that the Torah here is telling you that you're allowed to cut his payas first and then the rest of his head. According to Shlokish, that would never even be allowed, even if you hold a Seder Chaloisaseh, because you can easily give this haircut in a different way. So that Svar is Augustlog. But I want to bring up a very important point that we discussed earlier in the Masechta that's very relevant over here. Let's say it wasn't Augustlog. Let's say you would say Seder Chaloisaseh, then the Gemara doesn't have a problem. But if you think about it, when is he Mekayim the mitzvah of Taglachas? After it's all done. When is he being over cutting off his payas? Right away. So how can you say Seder Chaloisaseh? At the time that he's being over the loisaseh, he wasn't even Mekayim to say it. Oh, so that's what the Rishonim say, that when you say Seder Chaloisaseh, they don't actually have to occur simultaneously. As long as you need to be over the loisaseh in order to be over the Aseh, and it's done in the process, you'll still say on such a thing, Aseh Docha loisaseh. Okay, Gewaltig. It's very negay in many different halachas, such as the halacha is if you have milah, if you have to do a milah, and there's a tzaras on the makam milah, and there's a isur deraisa allowed to cut off the tzaras, are you allowed to do the milah b'tzaras? So they say Aseh Docha loisaseh. The problem is if you hold priya is a chelik of the mitzvah of milah, when you cut off the milah and you're over the lav of lo shiksu b'heres, you haven't yet been mekayim the mitzvah of milah because there still is the priya. So once again, this is where the Rishonim bring up that svara. Zok the Gemara weiter. Ella. It's a Seder Chaloisaseh. We learn Seder Chaloisaseh. Ella the Chula Alma, Hakafas Kol Roish. So you're telling me even if you wouldn't say Seder Chaloisaseh, over there's a special limit. Because I'm not sure how that works. Ella the Chula Alma, Hakafas Kol Roish, Shema Kafa. Everybody holds that Hakafas Kol Roish is Shema Kafa. So if that's the case, then you need to use the pasuk for the smallest chiddush that you're allowed to be over the individual lav of lo shakifu. But who said you could be over the lav of Naziris as well, where there's an extra loisaseh of Tarla Yavel Roishai and the extra Aseh of Kadosh Yagad Paris Roishai, Umandamukim Lukra Lumitchi Loisaseh Ve'aseh, and the Mandamer who uses it for Nazir, lav grade to be nulli. How does he know lav grade? You can't say a bigger chiddush. You can't say the pasuk is telling you that even if it's a loisaseh Ve'aseh, that the mitzvah of Mitzayah is doicha that, unless you already know the smaller chiddush from somewhere else, that an Aseh is doicha a regular loisaseh. Zaktamora, for that I have another makar, Yalef Megedilim. You learn it from the Parsha of Tzitzis. The Yom HaKra, the pasuk said, Loi sil b'shatnis, Utanya loi sil b'shatnis, Hagedilim tasalach mehem. Even though you can't wear shatnis, you're allowed to make tzitzis out of shatnis. So that's where we know the base halacha of Aseh doicha loisaseh. I don't need to learn that from the Parsha of Tziras. But Pasha of Tzaras, it tells us that not only is Aseh Docha Loisha by a Mitzayra, the Aseh is even Docha Loisha Ve'aseh. In fact, you have two Loisha says and one Aseh. You have the Loisha of Loisha Kifu, you have the Loisha by a Nazir of Tar Lo Yovel Roshai, and you have the Aseh of Nazir, and from Roshai you learn that the mitzvah of Tzaras is Docha all of those. It says, Lesil b'Shabbos, and right after it says, B'Gilum Tasal Lecha. So from the Smichas of Parsha, we learn that you're allowed to make tzitzis even if it's Shabbos. Because it's one after, it's two psukim back to back. Correct. I'm sorry? We're going to discuss more. There's a whole bunch of, not the way we're discussing, not as a sugi now. And the Mandamar who learns from Roshai, I say because the one who learned, the Tana that we said learns from Roshai, that a regular Yid can cut his hair off when he's a Mitzayra. My time will enough play Megadilim. Why do I need the pasuk by Mitzayra to tell you Seder Chaloiseh? Why didn't he use the pasuk by Tzitzis to tell you Seder Chaloiseh? Amalach l'chaderava. It's l'gabi Rava. L'chaderava Docha. The Rava Rami. Ravi had a big kasha. Ksiv it says v'nasnu al Tzitzis hakanaf. We have to see the back here to make this all make sense. It says v'nasnu al Tzitzis hakanaf min kanaf, which means the tzitzis have to be made out of the same fabric that the beged itself is made out of. Uksiv, and then it says later on, tzemer upishtin yachta. It says tzemer and pishtim. So haketzat, how do you do it? Tzemer upishtim, if the beged is made, if the tzitzis, the strings are made out of tzemer upishtim, poitrin, they're good kosher tzitzis, bein b'minin, bein shaloi b'minin. No matter what you put strings of wool or linen on, it will be good tzitzis. But shar meaning, if you want to use some other fabric to make these strings out of, then b'minin poitrin, shaloi b'minin onion poitrin. So the silver bullet, the tzitzis that work good on any type of beged are temer and pishtim. Any other material that the tzitzis are made out of, you could only use them for a beged that's made out of them. So therefore, they don't know Aseh Docha from tzitzis, so they're relying on the pasuk of Tzaras to teach us the basic halacha of Aseh Docha Loisha. Fact the Gemara by Tana the Mapik LeRoshai, Lilav Greda, and the Tana who's using Roshai for a Lav Greda, which is the Tana that we're talking about, who knows Aseh Docha Loisha, who doesn't know Aseh Docha Loisha, he knows it from Tzaras. So the Aseh say V'Doches Loisha ve'Aseh Minolam. How do you know Taka that a Nazir and a Mitzayra would get a haircut? You only know a regular guy gets a haircut. How do you know if he was a Nazir and a Mitzayra who'd get a haircut? There's another word in the pasuk. There's a ziknai in the pasuk. There's Tanya ziknai. Why did the Torah have to specify that a Mitzayra even cuts off his beard? There's a prohibition for a kohen to cut his beard. I would have thought that even a kohen who's a Mitzayra may not cut his beard, and the pasuk doesn't refer to a kohen when it says that a Mitzayra must cut his beard. Even a kohen has to cut his beard. Now a kohen is a lush of Aseh, because by a kohen it says and it also says kedoshim tiyu, which is considered an Aseh. Okay, we'll stop here. I'm already over. I already went over. We'll be mamshach tomorrow. So this is a chazar. We actually learned this whole sugya of where you know Aseh Docha Loisha from, Aseh Docha Loisha of Aseh, but we'll go through this tomorrow. Okay, shkoyach. That's right.